Hey guys, Weeby News here, and today I'm going to be making a video discussing the Danganronpa Mastermind AUs. And if you're not familiar with them, then I'll give a quick rundown. They're basically like what-if scenarios people in the fandom like to create based around the idea that there was a different mastermind other than the one in canon. For example, like what if Shihiro was the mastermind of Danganronpa 1 instead of Junko? How would that change the story? Would the victims and killers be different? Would the motives for each chapter change? But the biggest questions I feel like these scenarios raise is what would their motivation be for creating the killing game, and how would the other students react to it? There's tons of fan art for these scenarios for all the Danganronpa games, and they've always really interested me because firstly, the art looks cool, and secondly, because there is just so much you can imagine with these AUs. So recently I made some posts asking you guys for your opinions on Danganronpa 1 Mastermind AUs, and after receiving a ton of great feedback, I decided to make another poll where you guys could vote for who your favorite was out of the 5 most popular characters mentioned in the first post. So today I'm going to be going through the most popular ones based on the posts I made, and I'm going to be giving my thoughts on them as well as looking at your opinions on them too. I'm also going to be going through them in order from least popular to most popular based on the poll. And also, if you guys like this video, please leave a like and a comment. It really does help me out. And also, if you guys would be potentially interested in me making this a series, then I would love to make another video for Danganronpa 2. So feel free to let me know what your favorite Danganronpa 2 Mastermind AUs are, and I may end up including it in that video. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into the video. So first up is Kiyotaka Ishimaru, who only had about 8% of the votes in my poll, and was unfortunately ranked last out of the 5 characters I included. I was really surprised by this because he's probably one of the characters I've seen the most Mastermind fan art for. And not only this, he's the only character to my knowledge who has a semi-canon Mastermind design too, since in the Danganronpa 4 Coma manga book, they actually featured him in some Mastermind attire. And he's probably one of my favorites out of the alternate Masterminds for Danganronpa 1, and I'm honestly convinced he would have made a much better Mastermind than Junko personally. One of my main reasons for feeling this way is because I feel like he already has a decent motivation for putting a killing game together. In his free time events, we learn that he has a great disdain towards those deemed as geniuses. This is because his grandfather, who was previously the Prime Minister of Japan, was considered to be an effortless genius, and according to Ishimaru, because he had never known failure, he allowed himself to be controlled by naive emotions and was roped into a corruption scandal. After that, he fell from grace in both the political and business world, and fell into debt so great that it affected the future generations of his family even to this day. According to his free time events, he considers all the other classmates to be these types of geniuses, except for him and Makoto, who he deems to be normal, hardworking citizens. One of you guys, Pompadours on Twitter, had a really cool idea when it comes to twisting this bias against geniuses into just complete loathing. So basically, Ishimaru could have decided to create the killing game in order to pick the geniuses out of society so that he could create his perfect utopia where there's only hardworking normal people. I feel like the motives used in each chapter as well could have been created in order to show how geniuses will fall into the same greed and naivety his grandpa did, and broadcasting the death game to the entire world could be in order to prove to everyone how the world would be better off without these types of people. I really like this concept, and I think it's really cool that it doesn't include despair as the end goal. So I think it's really interesting to think of how the game's themes could have changed dramatically with a twist like this. And another really interesting comment I saw regarding this was by Flo on my community post. They mentioned that since Ishimaru's family has a history in politics, he might know how it works behind the scenes and use that to manipulate high-class groups. And I feel like this could easily explain the funding he receives to put on such a big project. They also mentioned Ishimaru and Mondo's relationship, and I think it would be really interesting to see how the scenario would affect it. I like to think that they would still become close and that their friendship would contribute to wavering his opinions towards hosting the killing game. And then how awful would it be that once he starts second guessing whether or not all geniuses are scum, if we see Mondo end up killing somebody or getting killed. For example, if he still killed Chihiro in the same way, this could really officially solidify Ishimaru in his beliefs that no genius should be trusted or given a chance ever. But anyways, this will conclude Ishimaru's section. Next, we're going to talk about Makoto Naegi as the mastermind. I do want to give a spoiler warning before I get into it though. I mentioned some big spoilers for both Danganronpa 2 and Danganronpa V3, and a slight spoiler for another episode. So skip to the time on the screen if you want to skip this section and avoid them, and I'll give you a few seconds. In the poll I posted on my community tab, he only won 9% of the vote, which barely put him above Ishimaru. And again, I was really surprised because I have seen a ton of fan art of Mastermind Nagi. But yeah, regardless, I do still think there's a lot of potential in Nagi being the mastermind. While researching this video, I read quite a few fanfictions, and one of them was called Unlikely by Magic Boy Miracle, and it included this exchange. After Nagi's big reveal to the group, Asahina states, "We aren't going to give up so easily. If we band together against you, there's nothing you can do." And he responds with, "You're just repeating my own words back to me. Boring." I feel like this really explains the main appeal of the Nagi mastermind scenario to me. He's the beacon of hope, so it'd be extremely despair-inducing for the others to find out that he was the true mastermind behind the killing game. Him encouraging them and giving them hope throughout the game, just to make their despair that much worse at the end, is truly poetic and would make for a very dramatic conclusion. It'd be really interesting to see everyone's reactions as well. I feel especially bad for Kirigiri since she's so untrusting of everyone originally, and Makoto is the first person in a really long time that she actually opens up to, and I feel like this would really stunt her progress, making her never want to get close to anybody again. And since Nagito is based off of Nagi, I think his mastermind version could resemble Kamaida's twisted version of hope. Specifically, I imagine his worldview to be similar to Kamaida when he's a remnant of despair, since in Ultra Despair Girls he admits he would be willing to become despair in order for a greater hope to overcome in the end. So I like to speculate that Mastermind Makoto would want to make the killing game and have despair overrun the world just so hope could shine even brighter in the end, and that he believes the greater the despair, the more spectacular it would be for hope to overpower it. As for backstory to set this up, maybe when he began attending Hope's Peak Academy, he felt incredibly inferior to the other students, to the point that it was just like suffocating. He felt this way until he realized that his true talent was to inspire others. Whenever his classmates, friends, etc. were down on their luck, he was able to inspire them and get them back on their feet. And the only time he felt truly fulfilled was inspiring others and watching them overcome any obstacle in their way. But in order to motivate them, something bad needs to happen to first set them back. So at first he starts off small, sabotaging people close to him so that he can later inspire them to overcome it, but eventually his desire grows greater and greater to the point that he eventually becomes despair himself, causing destruction everywhere he can in order to watch hope shine through in the end. And this could explain Makoto wanting to participate in the game even though he's the mastermind, since in this version he would get off on giving hope speeches. I'd like to think that he could still remain the protagonist even if he was the mastermind. I think they could get away with this as long as they write it similarly to the way they did for the first chapter in V3, where Kaide, the protagonist, was the killer, since in that chapter they worded things subtly in order to not give away to the player that she was the one who did it. I feel like this could definitely be possible if he had a twisted version of hope like Kamaida, since he'll still be genuinely enthusiastic about the others overcoming despair, which is something you wouldn't expect from the mastermind. So I think you could really pull one over on the players with this kind of idea. But yeah, this will conclude the section for Nagi. Let me know what you guys think for possible scenarios for him to fall into despair or want to lead the killing game. I'd love to hear them. Next up is Sayaka Mizuno, who in the poll earned about 17% of the votes and came in third place. I was actually pretty surprised that she gained this much of the vote, since in my other post she was the least mentioned out of the 5, and it actually was really close between her and Hagakure. I feel like Mizuno as the mastermind would be like a more well-integrated version of Junko. They're both famous female characters who are praised for their looks. The main difference when it comes to their background to me is that Mizuno had a previous connection to Makoto, which would make the mastermind reveal a lot more personal to him. As for her motivation, my idea is that she became addicted to fame. In the canon, we see her tell Nagi that she was willing to make many sacrifices and even do dark things in order to become an idol. So for her backstory, I'd imagine it to start the same as the canon, where her mom passed away and she lives alone with her father, who has to work long hours, leaving her home alone quite often. The only thing that comforted her was the idol live show, but in this version, she's envious of the attention that they receive, and instead of wanting to become an idol in order to comfort others, she instead wants to do it in order to compensate for the lack of attention she received as a child. Then once she begins receiving praise and gaining popularity, she becomes addicted to it. She's willing to do whatever it takes, even dark things. Eventually, she becomes one of the most famous idols in the country, but she still feels that hole inside her heart, and she assumes that she just needs more fame and more attention, even if if it's negative, she just wants people looking at her. Unfortunately, her attempts to become a global superstar end in failure. Her image just isn't quite appealing to the rest of the world the same way it does in Japan, and so her team eventually decides to give up since they're losing too much money in promotion, and that's when she decides to plunge the world into despair. She believes that if she accomplishes that, then everyone will know her, she'll be the most infamous person to exist, and maybe that will finally fill the hole in her heart. But that is my scenario I came up with for that one. I'd love to hear some of the backstories that you guys think would be interesting for her as a mastermind too. Next up is Kirigiri, and she was the second most popular choice in the poll with a whopping 23%. I think a big reason for her popularity in this poll is because she actually does have a pretty strong motive for wanting to put together the killing game. We know from the canon that Kirigiri resents her father, Jin Kirigiri, who was the headmaster of Hope's Peak Academy, since he abandoned her as a child and severed his connections with the rest of her family. Because of this, it makes a lot of sense as to why she would want to destroy Hope's Peak Academy in such an excruciating way. One of you guys in my comment section, Cybot1552, gave a really excellent rundown of how this AU could play out. In their comment, they mentioned that she could have gathered a deeply insightful knowledge about the school from her father since he's the headmaster, and this would give her an advantage on manipulating the environment, including which areas to unlock and when, and things like that. They also wrote that I could see her masterminding the whole killing game as an elaborate method of ruining her father's legacy and ambitions. This version of Kyoko's story would have her really hating her father to the point where she would get back at him by turning his Academy of Hope into one of despair. Clues to her mastermindness can also already be neatly found in the existing dialogue. One example would be in chapter 3 when she offers to leave her dorm door unlocked at night. The game treats this as a sign of her courage and badassery, and my version would still play it off as such, but in reality this is a clear hint that she does not feel like she's in any danger since this is a game she engineered herself. Finally, I would treat her partnership with Makoto as a somewhat more sinister affair. While in the real game, she is drawn to him because he's a beacon of hope whom she can trust. In my version, Kyoko is drawn to him because she sees him as the biggest threat to her game. Deciding to toy with him, she would spend the majority of the game like she does in canon, working with him and mentoring him, only to try to topple him at the very end, to dash his hope into despair when she is revealed as the mastermind all along. I thought the scenario was really cool, and one of the things I really like about it is that it makes her father's execution so much more impactful. In this version though, I could see her doing this execution last rather than first, and during the killing game's run, I imagine that she would force him to watch the school monitors while the killing game's going on, so that he has to watch in real time his daughter ruining his legacy, and that idea just gives me chills. I think it's so interesting. I feel like Kirigiri would also be the most intimidating mastermind out of the students. There's countless memes about how she carried the entire Danganronpa 1 cast throughout the first game, so having arguably the most competent member being the mastermind would be just absolutely devastating. I also think it'd be funny if during the reveal she taunts them, telling them that they're so dumb that she had to practically handhold them through some of the trials just so that they could reach her preferred climax for the killing game. But yeah, overall, I really do like this AU. It's not one I really thought about too much until I was making this video, but like I said, I feel like she does have really good built-in motives already, and it would definitely feel like a huge betrayal at the end of the game if she did end up being the mastermind. But yeah, feel free to let me know what you guys think about this too. Next up is Shihiro Fujisaki, who overwhelmingly dominated this poll with a huge percentage of 43%. Also, a big disclaimer for this section, I'm going to be referring to Shihiro as he, him in this video. I know there's a huge debate regarding Chihiro's gender identity, and personally, I see the argument on both sides, which is why I usually just kind of use they, them pronouns. And honestly, I don't think it's my place to get super involved in the discussion since I'm not really in either of the groups that Chihiro seems to really resonate with. So I highly recommend Oliver Antics' video on the subject if you want to learn more about that discourse. But anyways, for the sake of this AU, I'm going to refer to Chihiro as he, him because the motivation I created for Chihiro to become the mastermind relates very strongly to how Monokuma describes Chihiro's secret after the second trial. And for a quick summary, Monokuma states that the reason Chihiro dresses as a girl is because they were heavily bullied for being too weak and fragile. So in order to avoid this, Chihiro decided to present as female. I can see why this one became so popular. Firstly, Chihiro is adorable, so it'd be super shocking to see them be behind everything. Secondly, I saw a lot of you guys mention that a major reason you're interested in a Chihiro mastermind is because of how alter ego could fit into controlling the game behind the scenes. There is something really compelling about the idea of Chihiro playing the game fairly, dying in the same way they did in canon, and then having alter ego carry on their legacy after their death. Monokuma could be easily explained in this AU as well, since alter ego would allow Chihiro to participate in the game while they control Monokuma's personality and all other details of the killing game behind the scenes. Another really sinister aspect of this AU would be the idea that alter ego was faking their allegiance to the other students, and that all the hints they gave the group was just to give them a sliver of hope before crushing their spirits entirely. My My only slight issue with this AU is that I don't feel like there is as compelling of a motivation for Chihiro compared to some of the other students. Because of this, the best motivation I can think of has to change the canon a decent bit. And this idea is basically, what if the worst bullying Chihiro faced was done by the students of Hope's Peak Academy? We know that in the canon storyline, Chihiro was bullied heavily for being weak and frail, and in order to overcome this, looked up to physically strong male characters such as Mondo. So I was thinking that in order for Chihiro to have a proper motivation to take out his frustrations on the other classmates, it would need to be more personal. So let's say that everything is normal at first. Chihiro enrolls into Hope's Peak Academy pretending to be a girl and is happier than he's ever been. He's grown close to all the other students and feels like maybe now he finally has found a group that will accept him for who he is. So he comes out to the rest of the classmates and reveals that he's male, but instead of the reaction he's expecting, they're all really upset and they feel betrayed and lied to. And for the sake of this AU, let's say they all heavily subscribe to the idea of toxic masculinity. So after he finally opens up to them, they bully him so strongly to the point that it just completely breaks his spirit. And I imagine that the final moment that pushes him over the edge is a situation that parallels the events in canon Danganronpa. So the way I imagine it is Mondo reaches out to Chihiro and apologizes for being too harsh before, and as an apology offers to help train him to become stronger, but in reality, it's just a trick to humiliate him. Several of the other students come in to pin him down and they tie him up in the gym, similarly to how he's tied up in chapter 2. Of course, in this version, they don't kill him, it's just a bullying tactic to embarrass him, but they leave him there until one of the faculty members comes and finds him while closing the school for the day. And overall, it's just a really horrible and dehumanizing experience for him. And after this, he just completely breaks and decides that it's useless for him to try to become physically strong, and that instead he can prove he's stronger than the others by using his skills in order to create the killing game. This way, the killing game motivation is made to get revenge and prove that physical strength can't compete with mental strength. Like I said, I had to twist the canon a ton for this to work, like giving the other students totally different personalities, but this was the most interesting idea that I could come up with for Chihiro as a mastermind. So let me know in the comments what ideas you guys might have. I'd love to hear them. And finally, I want to share this other Chihiro AU that TJ Evie left in my comment section because I thought it was really creative. They wrote, I think an interesting take on a Chihiro mastermind AU would be if it was actually Alter Ego who was behind everything. As an AI, it would have had an easier time hacking into and corrupting Monokuma in order to control him, which makes even more of a mystery to everyone else as to who could be controlling Monokuma. Maybe Chihiro does create Alter Ego for the good of humanity, but as most works of fiction go, the AI becomes extremely sentient. Alter Ego might have viewed the world and society as not being worth being saved and decided to use its ability to slowly plunge the world into despair. If it still leads the Danganronpa 1 class into shutting themselves into Hope's Peak, after Alter Ego makes them lose their memories in order to start the killing game, it could always pretend it's in a different stage of development in order to trick Chihiro. It would definitely be heartbreaking to discover that the friendly AI was actually your enemy, and if Chihiro ends up as a survivor in this AU, I can only imagine the amount of guilt that would come with learning that something you made led to something so horrible. I just thought this AU was really creative and really interesting, especially the idea of Chihiro surviving towards the end and having to like face their own creation. I just thought that was like super cool, so I wanted to share it. Finally, I have some honorable mentions I'd like to feature. First is Mastermind Hagakure. I actually saw a lot of people show interest in him in the first community post I made. Unfortunately, he just barely avoided being included in the poll though. It seemed like a lot of you guys were interested in him being the mastermind since he's a super silly character most of the time and isn't taken very seriously, so it would be super surprising to see him in fact be the mastermind. One of you guys, Mango is Stupid, mentioned how funny it would be if the other classmates didn't actually believe him when he first reveals that he's the mastermind, and I thought it was just like hilarious to imagine that scenario. And overall, I never really thought about Hagakure as being a mastermind character, and I was kind of surprised to see his popularity at first, but now after reading a lot of you guys' comments, I do definitely see a big appeal in it. I saw a lot of you guys say that you think his talent would tie in really well with being a mastermind too, and I definitely do agree. Dr. Kapanov in my comment section pointed out that several of his predictions were in fact right, like for example when he says that nobody else is going to get murdered before Sakura's death, since that's technically true since Sakura's death was a suicide, and it would make a lot of sense for him to be able to predict the events of the game if he was in fact the one behind the scenes controlling it. So yeah, I thought that was another really interesting thing to point out. And finally, I wanted to mention this comment made by Funkrat where they created a scenario in which the Tagami Corporation is the mastermind behind the killing game. They wrote, not a typical mastermind AU idea, but the Tagami Corporation could have been a good villain behind the killing game. The Tagami Corp is never explained in depth, but it seems that they have an abundance of both money and power. This gives them the means to host the killing game while while explaining how the cast never ran out of food and supplies while trapped in Hope's Peak, which probably wouldn't be the real Hope's Peak in this scenario. The killing game could have been another way to test Byakuya and his resolve to win at all costs, since he says he had to defeat other Tagami heirs for the throne. This means that his mood shift throughout the game from a win at all costs mentality to a caring about the others mentality would be considered a failure by the Tagami Corporation and would cost him what he worked his whole life for. Also, you wouldn't need to drastically change any of the characters for this to work, in my opinion. I thought this idea was super cool, definitely one I had never thought of. It definitely ties in well with Tagami's whole arc in the game. But anyways, this will conclude the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please do leave a like and a comment and subscribe if you did enjoy it. And if you guys are interested in me making a sequel to this video, I would definitely love to make one for Danganronpa 2 as well. And yeah, feel free to leave what kind of scenarios you'd be interested in for that video if I do end up making it. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you real soon.